What you are about to experience is a lie. A beautiful, intricate, and thrilling lie. But within this lie, you will find a truth more fascinating than any fact. This is the story of magic. Not the magic of wizards and wands, but the magic of the human hand moving faster than the eye. The magic of the mind being led to a conclusion it knows is impossible. It is a history of deception in the name of wonder, of secrets guarded like royal treasure, and of the relentless pursuit of the ultimate illusion. It is a story that begins not on a stage, but in the dark, sacred spaces of the ancient world, and ends in the blinding lights of Las Vegas and the digital screens of the modern era. It is a chronicle of outcasts and kings, of geniuses and charlatans, of art and science intertwined. We will journey through thousands of years, across continents, into the minds of the most brilliant tricksters who ever lived. Forget everything you think you know. Suspend your disbelief. We are about to begin. Our story starts in the deep, resonant silence of prehistoric caves. Imagine a shaman, clad in animal skins, dancing before a terrified, awestruck tribe. He throws a handful of dried herbs onto the fire, and with a dramatic whoosh, a cloud of colored smoke erupts. In that moment, he is not a man. He is a conduit to the spirit world. This is the primordial root of magic, the use of natural phenomena, sleight of hand, and psychological manipulation to create an effect that transcends the ordinary. The shaman's magic was a tool for control, for healing, for explaining the terrifying chaos of the natural world. He might have used sleight of hand to produce a sacred object from a seemingly empty hand, or hidden bladders of animal blood to simulate a supernatural wound. The methods were simple, but the impact was profound. This was the birth of the magician's most powerful tool, misdirection. The audience's attention was directed to the meaning of the effect, the communion with gods, and away from the crude method. As we move from the vague mists of prehistory into the dawn of civilization, we find our first documented evidence of magical performance. The cradle of this art, like so many others, was ancient Egypt. In the dusty heat of the Nile Valley, around 2700 BCE, a performance was recorded on the West Kar papyrus. It tells the story of a magician named Dedi, summoned to the court of Pharaoh Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid. Dedi did not claim divine power. He was a performer, a conjurer. His legendary feats included decapitating a goose, a duck, and an ox, and then restoring them to life. The description is chillingly clear, a classic stage illusion that would feel right at home in a modern magic show. The method is lost to time, but we can speculate. Substitution, hidden compartments, or perhaps the use of trained, identical animals. The point is, Dedi was not worshipped as a god. He was admired as a master of his craft. He represented a crucial split, magic as entertainment, separate from religion, though still tinged with its aura. Meanwhile, in the sun-baked forums of ancient Greece and the sprawling bathhouses of Rome, magic took on a different, more populist form. The streets teemed with hustlers and performers known as acetabularii, cupmen, and manuprestigiators, fast-fingered ones. Their tools were simple, a few small balls and some cups, typically made of stone or clay. The cups and balls routine, which is still the ultimate test of a magician's sleight-of-hand skill today, was the staple of their trade. They would perform on street corners, moving the balls invisibly under the cups, making them vanish, penetrate, and multiply, all to the astonishment of a gathered crowd. These were the first true close-up magicians, working not for kings but for coins tossed into a hat. They faced a constant battle against perception. To the uneducated masses, their skill was often indistinguishable from genuine sorcery. Roman writers like Seneca and Titus Plautus wrote scathingly of these jugglers, dismissing them as common cheats, yet their descriptions provide a perfect blueprint of the tricks being performed. They knew the secrets, but the public did not. This created a delicious tension. Was one watching a skilled artist or a demonic entity? The line was perilously thin. This ambiguity is perfectly captured in the story of the famous Greek escape artist, the orator and statesman, Damis. According to legend, he was imprisoned and managed to escape his chains. While this was likely a story of political cunning, it was told and retold with the flavor of a magical feat. The ability to escape confinement would become one of magic's most enduring and powerful themes. As the Roman Empire crumbled and Europe descended into the Dark Ages, the light of performance magic flickered and nearly died. The new power, the Christian Church, had no tolerance for perceived demonism. Any display of seemingly supernatural power that did not come from God was deemed heretical and punishable by death. The magician, the juggler, the acrobat, all were classed as vagabonds and sinners, forced to the very fringes of society. They traveled in secretive troops, performing at remote fairs and in the shadows of great forests, always one step ahead of the authorities. Their magic became cruder, more reliant on gaffes and gimmicks that could be easily hidden or discarded. The age of the respected court magician was over, replaced by the age of the persecuted outcast. But while Europe slept, the flame of knowledge and artistry was kept burning elsewhere. In the sophisticated courts of the Abbasid Caliphate, in cities like Baghdad and Cairo, scholars were preserving and advancing the learning of the ancients. And with this learning came magic. The most important magical text of the early medieval period, the Book of Charlatans, was written in the 10th century by a Syrian doctor named Abu al-Qasim al-Zarawi. It wasn't a book of spells, but a cynical, practical guide for con artists, detailing how to perform tricks using sleight of hand, mechanical devices, and chemical reactions. It described the cups and balls, methods for swallowing and regurgitating objects, and even how to fake miracles. This text, and others like it, would eventually find their way back into Europe, carrying the seeds of the magic that would later blossom in the Renaissance. The Islamic world also gave us one of the most iconic images in all of magic, the floating ball. Descriptions of Mughal magicians, making metal or stone balls rise and fall from their hands, fascinated European travelers. The method, likely involving hidden threads or wires made from human hair or silk, was a closely guarded secret. This was magic as pure, beautiful, impossible mystery, and it captured the European imagination for centuries. The reawakening of Europe during the Renaissance brought with it a renewed interest in the mysterious and the marvelous. The printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440, would prove to be one of the most revolutionary tools in the history of magic. For the first time, knowledge could be disseminated widely and cheaply. The first true magic book, The Discovery of Witchcraft, was published in England in 1584. Its author, Reginald Scott, was a Puritan gentleman who wrote it with a serious purpose: to demystify magic and prove that those accused of witchcraft were merely using natural tricks and sleight of hand. In his fervor to save innocent lives, he inadvertently created the first public encyclopedia of magical secrets. He described in meticulous detail how to perform the cups and balls, how to make coins vanish, how to seemingly cut a piece of string and restore it, and even how to produce the illusion of decapitation. The Church and King James I were outraged. The book was ordered to be burned. But the genie was out of the bottle. Performers now had a textbook. This new age of discovery and science created a perfect environment for a new kind of magician, the scientific conjurer. The 17th and 18th centuries were the age of Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle, a time when the public was enthralled by science. Magicians cleverly co-opted this fascination. They presented themselves as professors of natural philosophy, and their tricks as scientific demonstrations. They used the latest inventions and discoveries, magnets, lenses, prisms, electricity, and chemistry, to create illusions that felt modern and thrilling. The greatest of these early scientific magicians was an Italian, Giovanni Giuseppe Pinetti. In the late 1780s, Pinetti took Europe by storm. He was no ragged street performer, he was a star. He performed in the finest theaters, dressed in extravagant, aristocratic clothing. His act was a spectacle of apparent scientific genius. He would use animal magnetism, a reference to the popular but fraudulent science of mesmerism, to control the thoughts of an audience member, or have a borrowed ring fly from his hand and be found inside a sealed box in a spectator's pocket. He used complex mechanical devices, often of his own invention, like an automaton that could read minds. Pinetti was a master of showmanship and the first true magician as celebrity. He understood that the presentation was as important as the trick itself. He published a book of his feats, further blurring the line between scientific discovery and magical deception. But the true crucible of modern magic was forming not in the courts, but in the bustling, rowdy atmosphere of the English pub. As the 18th century turned into the 19th, London was the largest city in the world, and its thirst for entertainment was insatiable. In the back rooms of taverns and in dedicated pleasure gardens, like the famous one at Vauxhall, a new institution was born, the music hall. These were not quiet, polite theaters. They were loud, boisterous, and demanding. An act had to be powerful, visual, and fast to hold the audience's attention. It was in this environment that a young man named John Henry Anderson, the Wizard of the North, honed his craft. Anderson was a force of nature. He was the first magician to understand the power of large-scale advertising, plastering cities with bold posters. He was the first to perform truly large-scale illusions on a proper stage, making use of the new technologies of gaslighting and stage machinery to create spectacular effects. He would fire a pistol at a suspended cage of live birds, and they would vanish in a puff of smoke. He would catch a bullet fired from a volunteer's gun on a plate. His shows were a riot of sound, light, and impossible transformations. Anderson brought magic out of the salon and into the modern theater. He made it a commercial, mass-market entertainment. And then, there was Robert Houdin. If one person can be said to be the father of modern magic, it is the Frenchman Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. A clockmaker by trade, Robert Houdin applied a scientist's mind and an artist's soul to the craft. In the 1840s and 50s, he revolutionized everything. He rejected the cliched image of the magician as a wizard in pointed hat and star-spangled robes. Instead, he took to the stage dressed as a contemporary gentleman, in formal evening wear. His stage was not a chaotic mess of magical paraphernalia, it was an elegant drawing-room setting. Robert Houdin's magic was a miracle of precision and subtlety. He presented his illusions not as demonic feats, but as marvels of his own personal ingenuity. His most famous effects were small-scale masterpieces of mechanics and psychology. In his light and heavy chest, a small ornate metal box was placed on the stage. A child from the audience could lift it with ease. Robert Houdin would then declare he had made the box heavy, and the strongest man in the audience would be unable to budge it. The secret was an electromagnetic plate under the stage carpet, activated by a hidden switch. But the presentation was one of sheer willpower. In another legendary routine, the ethereal suspension, he would have his son lean on a pole, then gradually remove the pole, leaving the boy hovering horizontally in midair. He would then place a glass of water on his son's chest and invite an audience member to drink from it. The effect was breathtakingly graceful and impossible. Robert Houdin's greatest trick, however, may have been one performed for his country. In 1856, the French government sent him to Algeria, then a French colony, to discredit the Marabout priests, holy men whose seemingly miraculous feats were fomenting rebellion. The tribesmen believed the Marabouts were invulnerable and possessed divine power. Robert Houdin performed his light and heavy chest routine, telling the tribal chiefs he could sap the strength of any man. When their strongest warriors failed to lift the box, they were terrified. He then performed his bullet catch, but with a crucial twist. He caught the marked bullet on a plate, but also showed that the bullet had been stopped by a metal plate he wore on his chest, which he displayed, dented and smoking. He presented his magic as a superior European technology, not sorcery. His mission was a success. He had used illusion to achieve a political goal, proving the power of the art form beyond mere entertainment. By the end of the 19th century, the stage was set, literally and figuratively. Magic was a respected, popular, and highly developed art form. It had structure, history, and a pantheon of heroes. The basic vocabulary of stage magic, vanishes, productions, transformations, penetrations, and restorations, was firmly established. The world was now connected by steamships and railways, and a magician could become an international star. The next chapter would see this art form explode into a global, industrial-scale spectacle, driven by competition, innovation, and the birth of the most legendary names in the history of illusion. The Golden Age was dawning. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were the Gilded Age, a period of immense industrial growth, grand ambition, and spectacular entertainment. Magic was about to enter its own gilded era, a period so rich with innovation and towering personalities that it is still referred to as the Golden Age of Magic. This was the age of the magician as global superstar, a figure of mystery and luxury who commanded vast sums of money and filled the largest theaters in the world. The driving force behind this explosion was a combination of technological innovation, ruthless business acumen, and sheer, unadulterated showmanship. The stage for this golden age was the world itself, but its epicenters were London and New York. Theaters were now equipped with revolutionary technologies, electric lighting, complex counterweight systems for flying scenery, and hydraulic lifts. Magicians could now create illusions on a scale previously unimaginable. But technology alone does not make a star. It requires a personality, a brand, an image so powerful it becomes larger than life. No one understood this better than the man who would become the undisputed king of this era, Harry Houdini. Born Eric Wise in Budapest in 1874, he emigrated with his family to America, where a legend was forged in sweat, iron, and ink. Houdini began as a conventional magician and a card king, performing skilled manipulation with playing cards. But he found his true calling in escapes. Houdini did not invent the escape act, but he perfected it, packaged it, and sold it to the world with a genius for publicity that has rarely been matched. His act was a narrative of triumph against impossible odds. He would be stripped naked, searched, and manacled with handcuffs provided by a local police force or a committee of skeptical citizens. He would then be placed inside a packing crate, nailed shut, locked with chains, and lowered into a river. Minutes later, he would burst to the surface, free, holding the locks and chains aloft. The effect was not just magical, it was visceral and heroic. It was the story of the little man defeating the immense, impersonal forces of authority, the police, the state, the prison. Houdini's escapes included: the milk can escape. 1908, he would be sealed inside a large, overflowing milk can, locked with several padlocks. A curtain would be drawn, and moments later, he would emerge, dripping wet, while the can remained securely locked. The Chinese water torture cell. 1912, his masterpiece. Houdini would be suspended by his ankles and lowered, head first, into a tall, front-paneled glass cabinet filled with water. The lid would be locked into place. He had to hold his breath for over 3 minutes while working himself free from within. The suspense was unbearable, the risk, seemingly mortal. The suspended straitjacket escape. 1916, performed not in a theater but in the full view of the public. He would be strapped into a brutal straitjacket and hung upside down from the roof of a skyscraper or a crane. He would then writhe and struggle until he worked himself free, often hundreds of feet in the air. Houdini's genius was in understanding the modern media. He courted newspaper reporters, staged dramatic publicity stunts, and even took on the entire spiritualist movement in his later years, exposing fraudulent mediums who preyed on the grieving. He presented himself not as a magician, but as an escapologist, a superhuman test of will and skill. He was a one-man industry, and he set the standard for what a magician could be, a global brand. But the Golden Age was not a one-man show. It was a crowded, competitive field of brilliant innovators, each carving out their own niche. While Houdini dominated the world of escapes, another legend was defining the art of stage magic itself, Howard Thurston. Thurston possessed a smooth, charismatic charm and an ambition to stage the greatest magic show on Earth. He took over the mantle from the previous generation's master, Harry Keller, in a formal public ceremony that was itself a piece of brilliant theater, symbolizing the passing of the torch. Thurston's show was a 3-hour extravaganza. His signature feat was the levitation of Princess Karnak. A female assistant would be laid on a couch, covered with a sheet. Thurston would make a few passes over her, and she would slowly rise, horizontally, several feet into the air. He would then pass a solid hoop over her body, proving no wires were holding her up. The illusion was a masterpiece of stagecraft and engineering, a secret method that is still used by magicians today. Thurston's show was a traveling behemoth, requiring dozens of railway cars to transport his scenery, props, and crew. He was the epitome of the large-scale illusion show. Meanwhile, in Britain, a different kind of magic was being perfected. David Devant was the star of Maskline and Devant's Egyptian Hall, London's home of magic. Devant was a performer's performer, less about grandiose spectacle and more about charm, comedy, and impossibly clean magic. He is often credited with performing the first true vanishing animal illusion, making a live pony disappear on a stage that was raised only a few inches from the ground. But his most lasting contribution was his philosophy. He famously said, "The proper way to do a trick is to first tell the audience what you are going to do it, and then tell them that you have done it." This emphasis on clear, direct communication and audience connection was a hallmark of the British style. This era also saw the rise of the specialist. If Houdini was the escape king, then there was a queen of magic. Adelaide Herman was the widow of the great magician Alexander Herman, but she was a star in her own right. After his death, she continued the show, becoming one of the most famous female magicians of all time. Her signature trick was catching a bullet fired from a pistol in her teeth, a feat of nerve and timing that always brought the house down. She proved that magic was not solely a man's world. Another specialist was the master of manipulation, Houdini. Born Richard Valentine Pitchford in Wales, Houdini developed his sublime sleight-of-hand skills in the trenches of World War I, practicing with a pack of cards to keep his fingers from freezing. His stage persona was that of a tipsy, tuxedoed gentleman who, to his own apparent surprise, found playing cards, billiard balls, and cigarettes multiplying at his fingertips. His act was a silent ballet of elegance and humor, a perfect fusion of skill and character. He showed that magic could be an art of subtlety and nuance, not just loud spectacle. The tools of the trade were also evolving rapidly. The invention of new materials, like lightweight aluminum and strong, thin wires, allowed for illusions that were more portable and more deceptive. The most significant innovation, however, was psychological. Magicians began to systematically apply the principles of psychology to their craft. They studied attention, perception, and memory to learn how to better misdirect and mislead their audiences. They realized that the most powerful magic happens not in the hands of the magician, but in the mind of the spectator. This psychological approach was perfected by a man named Max Mellini. A short, unassuming man of Austrian origin, Mellini was the antithesis of Thurston's grand spectacle. He was a close-up magician who performed for kings, presidents, and captains of industry. His power lay in his audacity and his understanding of human nature. He would be a guest at a formal dinner and, for his finale, produce a solid block of ice from under his coat. He would borrow a man's hat and, a moment later, return it with a small, live pig inside. Mellini's magic was intimate, shocking, and deeply personal. He proved that an effect's impact was inversely proportional to the size of the audience. A miracle for one person was often more powerful than a large illusion for 1,000. The Golden Age was also the age of the Magic Club and the Magic Dealer. Organizations like the Magic Circle in London, founded 1905, and the Society of American Magicians, founded 1902, provided a community and a forum for the exchange of ideas, while fiercely guarding secrets from the public. Meanwhile, companies like Martinka and Company in New York and Will Goldston in London manufactured and sold illusions and tricks to professional magicians, democratizing access to the tools of the trade. But all golden ages must end. The rise of a new, even more powerful form of mass entertainment, the cinema, began to eclipse live magic. Why watch a man saw a woman in half on a stage when you could watch Douglas Fairbanks swing from a castle parapet on a 30-foot screen? The Great Depression of the 1930s made large, expensive touring illusion shows financially unsustainable. The world was plunged into war, and the appetite for light-hearted spectacle waned. The great icons passed away. Houdini died on Halloween, 1926, from a ruptured appendix following a surprise punch to the stomach. Thurston retired, his massive show a relic of a bygone era. It seemed as if the art of magic might fade into a quaint curiosity. But magic is an art of resurrection. It always finds a way to adapt, to evolve, and to astonish anew. The third act of our story would see magic retreat from the giant stage, only to re-emerge, transformed, in the most powerful medium of the modern world, television. The post-World War II world was a different place. Television sets began to appear in living rooms, and a new form of celebrity was born, the TV star. For magic, this was both a threat and an unprecedented opportunity. The threat was obvious. How could a live, theatrical art form compete with the intimate, close-up power of the small screen? The opportunity, as a few visionary magicians realized, was that television could bring magic directly into the homes of millions, creating a level of fame and influence previously unimaginable. The first magician to truly conquer this new medium was a suave, charismatic Italian-American named Johnny Carson? No, not yet. Before Carson became the king of late night, he was a magician known as the Great Carsoni. But the man who truly defined television magic for a generation was Mark Wilson. His show, The Magic Land of Alakazam, which aired from 1960 to 1964, was the first network television series devoted to magic. Wilson understood the medium instinctively. He used camera tricks, stop-motion, editing, and special lenses to create illusions that were impossible on a live stage. He made an elephant vanish. He sawed his wife, Nanny, in half in full view of the camera. Wilson proved that television wasn't just a platform for showing magic, it was a new tool for creating magic. A generation of future magicians, including a young David Copperfield, sat glued to their sets every week, learning from the master. But if Wilson showed the potential of TV magic, it was Doug Henning who brought it back to the forefront of popular culture. In the 1970s, magic had become stale. It was often perceived as corny, with cheesy tuxedos and cliched patter. Henning, a Canadian with the appearance of a blissed-out hippie, exploded onto the scene with his 1975 Broadway show and NBC special, The Magic Show of Doug Henning. With his long hair, colorful tie-dye shirts, and genuine sense of wide-eyed wonder, Henning made magic feel fresh, joyful, and cool again. His signature illusion, walking through a brick wall, was televised and became an instant classic. He didn't just perform tricks, he sold a philosophy of peace, love, and the power of imagination. Henning's success paved the way for the single most important magician of the television age. That magician is David Copperfield. Beginning in the 1980s, Copperfield didn't just have TV specials, he created television events. Each special was a cinematic production with a budget of millions, a storyline, original music, and a single iconic illusion as its centerpiece. Copperfield understood the power of narrative. He didn't just vanish an object, he made the Statue of Liberty disappear, framing it as a grand patriotic mystery. He didn't just fly, he flew over the Grand Canyon, making the personal dream of flight a reality. He didn't just escape from a trap, he escaped from Alcatraz, chaining himself to the history of America's most infamous prison. His list of illusions is a catalogue of modern magic's greatest hits. Asterisk Vanishing the Statue of Liberty, 1983, performed live before a television audience. With a rotating platform and a curtain, he seemingly made one of the world's most massive structures vanish. Asterisk Walking through the Great Wall of China, 1986, in a feat that blended Eastern mystery with Western showmanship, he was shown passing through the solid stones of the ancient wall. Asterisk The Flying Illusion, 1992, a simple, beautiful effect. He would fly, unaided, around the stage, and even take an audience member with him. It was the realization of a universal human fantasy. Asterisk The Death Saw, 1994, a modern, terrifying take on the sawing illusion, where he was clearly strapped into a device and bisected by giant spinning blades. Copperfield's contribution was to make magic feel real, dangerous, and emotionally resonant. He was the first magician to become a global superstar on the level of a rock musician or movie star. He also amassed one of the most important historical collections of magical artifacts in the world, preserving the art's history even as he was rewriting its future. While Copperfield dominated the large-scale special, another revolution was happening on the streets. The 1970s and 80s saw a grassroots movement to bring magic back to its close-up, interactive roots. The godfather of this movement was Dai Vernon, the Professor. A meticulous craftsman who spent his life at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, Vernon's philosophy was that magic should be pure, effortless, and utterly baffling. He inspired a generation of street magicians who rejected the formality of the stage for the raw immediacy of performing one-on-one. This street magic movement found its television voice in David Blaine. When his special Street Magic aired in 1997, it was a shock to the system. Blaine's style was the polar opposite of Copperfield's grand spectacle. He was a silent, intense figure in a hoodie and jeans, performing impossibly clean card magic and coin bends for random people on the streets of New York. The camera was shaky, close-up, and focused on the reactions of the spectators, their screams, their disbelief, their profanity. It felt real, unedited, and visceral. Blaine's magic wasn't about a story, it was about a moment of pure, cognitive shock. He then took this aesthetic and applied it to endurance stunts, framing them as modern-day Houdini-esque ordeals. Asterisk Buried Alive, 1999, he was sealed in a transparent coffin under a ton of water for 7 days. Asterisk Frozen in Time, 2000, he was encased in a block of ice for 63 hours. Asterisk Above the Below, 2003, he lived in a transparent box suspended over the River Thames in London for 44 days with no food. These were not magic tricks in the traditional sense. They were feats of willpower and physiological endurance, but they were presented with the language of magic. They created a media frenzy and made Blaine a household name, proving that the public's fascination with seemingly impossible human achievement was as strong as ever. The turn of the 21st century saw magic fragment into 1,000 different styles, reflecting the fragmented nature of media itself. The Internet became the new repository of secrets and the new platform for performance. YouTube and social media allowed magicians to build global audiences without ever getting a TV special. A new generation of YouTube magicians, like Dynamo, Stephen Frayne, from the UK, emerged. Dynamo's Magician Impossible series showed him walking on water across the River Thames, levitating upside down next to the Shard skyscraper, and producing a can of beer from a smartphone screen. His magic was seamlessly integrated into the urban environment and youth culture, making it feel organic and incredibly shareable. Meanwhile, the art of mentalism, magic that plays with the perception of mind reading, prediction, and influence, found its own superstar in Darren Brown. A British performer with a background in psychology and hypnotism, Brown took mentalism to a new level of intellectual sophistication. He explicitly states that he uses magic, suggestion, psychology, misdirection, and showmanship, yet his feats are so convincing that audiences often leave believing he has genuine psychic powers. His specials, like The Heist, where he seemingly programmed ordinary people to commit a robbery, or Apocalypse, where he convinced a man he was living through a zombie apocalypse, are not collections of tricks. They are deep, psychological experiments filmed as high-stakes drama. Brown elevated magic from a puzzle to be solved to a profound exploration of how the human mind makes decisions and constructs reality. In the modern era, the lines have blurred completely. Penn and Teller, the bad boys of magic, have had a decades-long career built on deconstructing the art form. They often reveal the secrets of their tricks, only to then perform a version that is even more baffling. Their act is a hilarious, cynical, and deeply intelligent commentary on magic itself. They challenge the audience to think critically, even as they fool them. Today, magic is more popular and diverse than ever. It exists on the grand stages of Las Vegas, where magicians like Chris Angel, with his dark, rock-and-roll aesthetic and large-scale, dangerous illusions, and Shin Lim, with his silent, elegant, and impossibly slick card manipulation that feels like digital art come to life, push the boundaries of what is possible. It thrives in the close-up galleries of the Magic Castle and in the bustling streets of every major city. It is dissected and discussed on online forums and taught in digital masterclasses. The history of magic is a mirror of human history itself. It reflects our fears, our beliefs, our scientific understanding, and our technological advancements. From the shaman in the cave using misdirection to connect with the gods, to the modern mentalist using psychology to explore the architecture of the mind, the goal has always been the same: to create a moment of genuine wonder. To briefly lift the veil of the mundane and show us a glimpse of the impossible. In a world that is increasingly explained, quantified, and digitized, that moment of wonder is more valuable than ever. The lie is still beautiful, and the truth within it, that we have an endless capacity for astonishment, is the most magical thing of all.